A woman stood before Congress and said she was taken on a trip with Jeffrey Epstein, Bill Clinton, and other world leaders. The room went completely silent. No one moved. No one even blinked. For a moment, it felt like time just stopped. Because this wasn't another news story about Epstein's crimes that people could scroll past and forget. This was about the system that protected him. The people who knew. The ones who looked the other way while young women disappeared into his orbit. Shante Davies wasn't there to be a headline. She was there to look directly at the people who'd ignored her pain for over 2 decades and tell them exactly what they'd been hiding. And what she revealed wasn't just about one predator. It was about an entire machine built to keep monsters like him untouchable.
Hello, my name is Shante Davies, and I'm here before you today as a survivor of decades of pain, trauma, and betrayal at the hands of Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein, and the people who enabled them, and a government that for far too long refused to help. In 2002, I was living in California, a young woman with high aspirations of becoming an actress. I was already beginning to make a name for myself in the industry. A person I trusted, someone I thought was a friend, invited me to meet a powerful woman who could help advance my career. That woman happened to be Ghislaine Maxwell. I was asked to give her a massage, though I had almost no experience, and when I did, she praised me and promised introductions to someone enormously powerful, someone who could change the course of my life, and that man was Jeffrey Epstein. At first, I was an excited young woman on top of the world. Epstein flew me to his private island. He listened to my dreams, promised to help, but his promises came with a catch. The abuse began. He told me to keep it secret. He manipulated me with quid pro quo I did not consent to, but I felt I had no one to turn to. He was too powerful. I was just one of the many young women trapped in his orbit. I was even taken on a trip to Africa with former President Bill Clinton and other notable figures. In those moments, I realized how powerless I was. If I spoke out, who would believe me? Who would protect me? Epstein himself was the most powerful leader of our country. Epstein surrounded himself, with the most powerful leaders of our country and the world. He abused not only me, but countless others, and everyone seemed to look away. The truth is, Epstein had a free pass. He bragged about his powerful friends, including our current president, Donald Trump. It was his biggest brag, actually. And while what I endured will haunt me forever, I live every day with PTSD. I live as a mother trying to raise my child while distrusting a world that has betrayed me. This kind of trauma never leaves you. It breaks families apart. It shapes the way we see everyone around us. But one thing is certain, unless we learn from this history, monsters like Epstein will rise again. There are files, government files, that hold the truth about Epstein, who he knew, who owed him, who protected him, and why he was allowed to operate for so long without consequence. Why was Maxwell the only one held accountable when so many others played a role? Why does the government hide this information from the public? This secrecy is not protection, it's complicity. And as long as the truth is buried, justice will remain out of reach. That is why this bill matters. Passing it will, bless you, ensure that the suffering of survivors is not in vain. Passing it will bring accountability, transparency, and prevention. It will help protect the next generation of predators who seek to place themselves above the law through wealth, influence, and connections. This is not just my story. It is about every survivor who carries invisible scars. It's about the weight we live with daily. It is about the families broken and the futures stolen. So I ask you, President Trump and members of Congress, why do we continue to cover up sexual abuse and assault? Who are we covering for? Let the public know the truth. We cannot heal without justice. We cannot protect the future if we refuse to confront the past. Thank you.
In 2002, Shante was living her dream in California. She was young, ambitious, already making moves in the entertainment industry as an aspiring actress. She had that fire, that drive that separates people who want it from people who make it happen. Then someone she trusted, someone she thought was a genuine friend, came to her with an opportunity. They told her about a powerful woman who could open doors, who knew everyone worth knowing in the industry. That woman was Ghislaine Maxwell. Shante was asked to give Maxwell a massage. She barely had any experience, but she did it anyway. And Maxwell praised her, told her she was talented, told her she knew someone who could change everything for her, someone with more power and connections than anyone Shante had ever met. That man was Jeffrey Epstein. At first, it felt like destiny. Epstein flew her to his private island. He listened to her dreams, asked about her goals, made promises that sounded too good to be true, because they were. His promises came with a price she never agreed to pay. The abuse started, not with force at first, but with manipulation, with quid pro quo arrangements she never consented to. He told her to keep it secret, made her feel like she had no choice. And honestly, who did she have to turn to? This man had everyone in his pocket, but the moment that really broke something inside her was when she was taken on a trip to Africa. With former President Bill Clinton, with other powerful figures whose names carry weight in every room they enter, she was surrounded by people the world looked up to, and in that moment, the full reality crashed down on her. If she spoke out, who would believe her? Who would protect her? Epstein wasn't just some rich guy. He surrounded himself with the most powerful leaders in America and across the globe. He bragged about his connections constantly. His biggest flex? His friendship with Donald Trump, who's now president again. Shante realized she was trapped in a web so vast that screaming wouldn't even create an echo. Epstein abused her. He abused countless others. And everyone just looked away. She lives with PTSD every single day now. She's a mother trying to raise her child in a world she can't trust anymore. The trauma doesn't fade. It doesn't heal with time. It mutates. It turns into anxiety, into hypervigilance, into the exhausting work of pretending everything's fine when your brain is constantly reliving what happened. That's what this kind of betrayal does. It doesn't just hurt you once. It breaks you in ways that keep breaking you for the rest of your life. But here's what makes this so much worse. Epstein had a free pass. For years. And it wasn't an accident. Think about the Florida plea deal. You've probably heard about it, but let's talk about what it actually meant. Epstein was caught. The evidence was there. Prosecutors had him. And instead of throwing the book at him like they would at literally anyone without money and connections, they cut a deal that's so outrageous, it sounds fake. He got to serve time in a private wing of the jail. Not a cell, a wing. He was allowed to leave during the day for work release. 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, he just walked out. And while he was supposedly serving his sentence, his network kept running. That wasn't justice. That was the system telling every survivor in America that if your abuser has enough money or knows the right people, you don't matter. Your pain doesn't matter. The law doesn't apply to them the same way it applies to everyone else. And get this. After everything, after all the victims who came forward, after all the evidence that piled up, only one person was held accountable. Ghislaine Maxwell. She's in prison right now, but Epstein? He's gone. And all the people who enabled him, who flew on his planes, who attended his parties, who took his money, who made phone calls to make his problems disappear. They're still out there, living their lives, holding positions of power, which brings us to the elephant in the room, the files. There are government files that hold the truth about everything. Who Epstein knew, who owed him favors, who protected him, and why he was allowed to operate for so long without real consequences. Flight logs that show exactly who went where and when. Bank transfers that reveal who funded what. Visitor lists from his properties, internal memos from agencies that investigated him or chose not to, phone records, emails, evidence that could finally connect all the dots, and those files are sealed, locked away, hidden from the public. Every time someone requests access to these documents, the excuses start rolling in. Privacy concerns, national security, ongoing investigations, protecting the innocent. It's always something, but let's cut through it. What they're really protecting isn't privacy or security. It's power. Because somewhere in those files are names. Names of people who are still influential, still wealthy, still walking around like nothing ever happened. If those documents proved corruption, why hide them? If they proved innocence, why keep them sealed? Either way, the only reason to bury the truth is because the truth is dangerous to someone who matters. And apparently, survivors don't matter as much as protecting reputations. Meanwhile, what happens to the people who lived through this? They wake up every day, reliving it. Shante told Congress that trauma doesn't fade, it mutates. Every delay, every excuse, every closed door is another layer of betrayal. Because it's not just that Epstein hurt her, it's that the government is still choosing to hide what happened, still choosing to protect the people who let it happen. Think about what that means. Memories fade over time, documents get lost or destroyed, witnesses disappear or stop cooperating. Every year that passes makes it harder to get justice. And that's not an accident. That's how obstruction works. You don't have to actively destroy evidence if you just wait long enough for time to do it for you. Financial institutions are still hiding behind client confidentiality. Prosecutors who cut those sweetheart deals are still practicing law. Politicians who took Epstein's donations or attended his parties are still making laws. The ecosystem that enabled him is still intact. And without transparency, it's going to enable the next one too, because here's the thing. This isn't just about Jeffrey Epstein. It's about what happens when money becomes stronger than justice, when powerful people can buy secrecy, when evidence disappears because it's inconvenient, when the law protects the powerful and punishes the powerless. But Shante didn't go to Congress just to share her pain. She went there with demands, specific, actionable demands that could actually change the system. She called for an independent review of all Epstein-related investigations, with survivor protections built in from the start. No more agencies investigating themselves. No more internal reviews that conveniently find no wrongdoing. Independent, transparent, accountable. She demanded a ban on secret non-prosecution agreements. You know, the kind that let wealthy offenders quietly walk away while survivors are left in the dark wondering why nothing happened. Those deals shouldn't exist. Full stop. If you're going to make an agreement not to prosecute someone, the public has a right to know why. She pushed for stronger victim rights enforcement, so prosecutors can't just ignore the people most affected by these crimes. Too often, survivors find out about plea deals after they're signed. They have no say, no voice. They're treated like evidence instead of people. That has to change. And she called for independent special prosecutors or bipartisan commissions to investigate networks of trafficking where power, money, and politics intersect. Because regular law enforcement has proven they can't or won't do it. When the people you're investigating have the power to end your career with a phone call, you need someone who can't be touched. These aren't abstract ideas. This is the blueprint for preventing the next Epstein. But reform doesn't come easy, especially when it threatens the people who benefited from silence. Every institution that looked away has a reason to keep the truth buried. Universities and charities that accepted Epstein's donations don't want to answer questions about whether they knew. Financial firms that moved suspicious money don't want regulators asking why they didn't flag it. Government agencies that signed off on travel clearances or funding don't want to admit they missed obvious red flags. Each layer of protection created another wall that survivors had to climb, and most of them never made it over. That's why public pressure is everything. Without it, these files stay sealed. Without it, reforms die in committee meetings that nobody pays attention to. Without it, the courage that survivors like Shante showed just fades into headlines that people scroll past. Politicians love to turn tragedies into partisan arguments. They use stories like this for sound bites and fundraising emails while doing absolutely nothing to fix the system. Both sides do it. And that's what makes Shante's testimony so powerful. She didn't name political parties. She named failures. Failures that cross every level of power, every administration, every ideology. She's right. Every time a politician dismisses survivors or calls their stories exaggerated, another door closes for the people still too afraid to speak up. That's how silence wins. Not through force, but through exhaustion. Through making it so hard to be heard that people just give up. And here's what should terrify everyone. These systems of protection still exist. The legal loopholes, the donor influence, the political favors, the ability to make problems disappear if you know the right people, all of it is still there. Which means another Epstein could be building the same kind of empire right now. Different name, same methods, same silence. That's what makes what Shante did so important. She didn't speak because she wanted sympathy or attention. She spoke because she wanted accountability. Her testimony is a mirror held up to power, showing every person who ever said, "That's not my problem," exactly how it becomes everyone's problem. When you listen to her words, you don't just hear anger, you hear exhaustion. The voice of someone who's been fighting for years just to be believed. She doesn't want vengeance. She wants truth. And in this case, truth means transparency. It means opening those files and letting the evidence speak for itself. Think about it. If the files prove corruption, the public deserves to know. If they somehow prove innocence, then releasing them should be easy. Either way, sunlight is the only path forward. But maybe that's exactly why it's taking so long. Because once the truth comes out, it won't just implicate one man who's already gone. It could expose an entire ecosystem of people and institutions that thrived on silence. Politicians, financiers, celebrities, officials who either looked away or quietly benefited. This isn't conspiracy theory territory. This is documented history. We've already seen fragments of it through court documents and investigative journalism. The rest is sitting behind closed doors, waiting for someone to pry them open. So the question becomes, how much longer are we willing to wait? How many more survivors have to stand in front of Congress and relive their trauma before transparency outweighs political risk? Because, make no mistake, the fight for these files isn't just a legal battle. It's a moral one, and here's the part where this stops being about them and starts being about us. Every person watching this right now has a role to play. When public pressure builds, politicians listen. When voters demand transparency, documents get unsealed. When media outlets see that people still care, they keep digging instead of moving on to the next story. That's how change actually happens. Not through silence, but through collective noise. Shante Davies stood alone in that room when she told her story, but she shouldn't have to stand alone now. So what can you actually do? Start by sharing her testimony. Keep this story alive in public memory because the powerful are counting on everyone to forget. Support the organizations that offer survivors legal aid and counseling. They're doing the work that the government should be doing. Write to your representatives, call them, demand that they support legislation forcing disclosure of Epstein-related records with proper redactions for privacy, sure, but not secrecy for protection. There's a difference. The truth doesn't belong to the powerful. It belongs to the public. If you've watched this far, you already know why this matters. You understand that silence helps predators and transparency protects future victims. Shante Davies didn't risk everything just to tell her story and have it disappear into the void. She did it to end the silence. And the absolute least we can do is listen, speak up, and make sure her courage wasn't wasted. The story isn't over. The files are still sealed, the system is still protecting the same people, and survivors are still waiting for justice. But if enough people refuse to let this go, if enough voices demand accountability, things can change. They have to. Because the alternative is letting the next Epstein build his empire in the shadows while everyone looks away again. So if you believe the truth deserves daylight, don't just watch this and move on. Share it. Comment to keep the algorithm pushing it. Subscribe for more investigations that refuse to let power hide behind sealed doors. Because this fight isn't over, and neither is the search for truth.